Call to order this meeting of the Susquehanna Township Board of Commissioners, and welcome to all of you. I would note that all commissioners are here with the exception of Commissioners Napper and Engel, who are both excused. We'll start tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence, and the pledge tonight I would ask to be led by Judge Laurie Saratelli.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening once again. We have a very special night for all of us, more special for some of us, and most special for one of us, Diane. The new First Lady, we presume, of the Second Ward. At first order of business is for the Board of Commissioners to consider Resolution 17R10, which would accept the resignation with regret of Michael Schubert from the office of Susquehanna Township Ward 2 Commissioner and appoint Gary A. Rothrock to serve the remainder of the unexpired term of Michael Schubert. Do we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Commissioner. Judge Saratelli, could you please administer the oath?
I will, thank you. Should we come up front?
Yeah.
Let me just say first, I am honored and grateful to be asked to do this. I think Gary and I met probably about 30 years ago when he coached our older son in Little League. And that is an amazing task for anyone to do. And he taught my son sportsmanship and how to have fun. You weren't the type of coach that was a killer coach to win it all.
That's why I never coached real little.
But thank you for that. And as a resident of Susquehanna Township for about 31 years now, this is a special honor. So now will you please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Gary A. Rothrock,
I, Gary A. Rothrock,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I shall support, obey, and defend
that I shall support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I shall, to the best of my ability,
and that I shall, to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties of my office
discharge the duties of my office
as Commissioner of Susquehanna Township
as Commissioner of Susquehanna Township
with fidelity, so help me God.
with fidelity, so help me God. Thank you very much. So now I can sit up here.
Let me take the hot purple.
It's required.
Judge, can I get you a second?
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Gary, did you get the message? The seat brings the donuts.
Next meeting, I'll be. I'd just like to say thank you to all the commissioners for their friendship and kindness and kind of helping me along to try to learn the ropes here. I got a long way to go, but Rusty, Frank, and Mike, and Dave, really appreciate your help. I'll need more of it. Thank you.
Well, you have big shoes to fill down there, but not necessarily in length, but in width. But,
That's
going to get back to see what you can do. At least you played better guitar than Mike did. So welcome, Gary. And welcome, Diane, the new First Lady of the Second Ward. Okay, moving along to public hearings. Real stuff. Public hearing to receive public comment for the incurrence of lease rental debt in the amount of $9,993,000 in connection with the financing of the refunding of a portion of the outstanding guaranteed sewer revenue bonds, series of 2012 of the Susquehanna Township Authority. Does anybody have any comment or questions on that before we proceed with our agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll go on with our presentations. Commissioner Johnson is going to make a presentation with Proclamation 17P03, Mount Sinai AME Church, and it's their 100-year anniversary, believe it or not.
Is there somebody here from Mount Sinai?
There you go.
Proclamation number 17P03. Whereas Mount Sinai African American Episcopal Church was established by a group of Edgemont residents and has been an integral part of the Edgemont community and the largest Susquehanna Township community since 1917. And whereas Mount Sinai AME Church, affiliated with the African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1932, and whereas for the past 100 years, the mission and activities of Mount Sinai AME Church has been sustained by its committed and dedicated membership, cementing Mount Sinai as a cornerstone of Susquehanna Township's community and faith. And whereas, while it has undergone and experienced many changes over the past 100 years, the mission of Mount Sinai AME Church has remained consistent in its efforts to work in unity, to train, teach, mentor, and provide support to people so they will become committed servants of Jesus Christ. And whereas Mount Sinai AME Church is celebrating its 100th anniversary in 2017. Now therefore, we, the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Susquehanna, do hereby designate Wednesday, August 26, 2017, to be observed as Mount Sinai AME Church Day. Signed and presented this 10th day of August 2017. Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations. If you care to say anything about the church, you're more than welcome to use the podium.
I just want to thank everyone, all of you commissioners here. We are so excited at Mount Sinai of our 100th anniversary. All of the history that I've only been here for 15 years, but there is so much rich history in that church. We are exceptionally proud of it, and we thank you for honoring us.
Well, thank you for 100 years of being a cornerstone of the community, as
We
Mona
hope to
said.
be here for another 100 years.
We'll be watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is a presentation from S&B Company. Do we have that?
Yes.
You know what? Probably we ought to get to first, if I can jump around a little
Yeah,
bit. Do we have anybody in the audience? This is going to be an audit report, and it's really long and boring. Sorry.
I feel like I always go after the awards and nominations. That same level of excitement, yeah.
But does anybody wish to speak to the board tonight on any matter? This is a public comment period. Okay. Hearing not, come on up.
Normally the room clears out when I get up for presentations. So
Heading out
thank you
too.
for staying.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
But anyway, you should have in front of you a rather thick packet of our audit presentation as well as the draft financial statements behind it. What I'll do is I'll walk through the results of the audit, highlight a few items within the financial statements, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. We did meet last week with the Finance Committee to also go through the financial statements, but as I'll highlight in here, this document we're prepared to issue upon approval and obtaining a management representation letter. I'm Chris Lehman. I was on the audit again this year. I'll start on page 5 that shows the scope of services that we were engaged to perform. We were engaged to perform an audit of the December 31st, 2016 financial statements of the township. We also assist in drafting the financial statements. All of the information within the financial statements is the responsibility of management. We get the information from management in order to draft the financial statements. We assist in completing the state DCED filing, which is a filing of the financial information related to the township. It relates to those figures relate back to the financial statements. as well as we're available for year-round consultation. If you have issues or questions that arise during the year, we make ourselves available at no additional cost. Excuse me. On the next page, you'll see a summary of the results. We're planning to issue an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. That would be the best opinion we can give under professional standards. We didn't discover any instances of fraud. We weren't engaged to do a fraud-specific audit, but we just have to have a healthy skepticism that fraud can occur at any time by anyone. Last year, we had some challenges getting through the audit as far as, and I'll highlight the recommendations we had from the prior year, but we had several material weaknesses and significant deficiencies. We've noticed progress on those items, so I will highlight the items that have been resolved and what's still in process and being worked through by the township. We received full cooperation of management, so any questions that we had, we got answers for. Any records that we needed, we got the backup for those records. And I will highlight the numbers in a little more detail, but you'll see for on the entity-wide basis, that includes the general fund plus all fixed assets and long-term liabilities. There's a positive change in net position for 2016 of roughly $496,000. That increases the township's net position to $3.5 million for the year ended December 31st, 2016. Also on that page, you'll see from 14 to 15, that net position went down approximately $8 million. That was due to the implementation of the new pension standard, which required a restatement of the beginning net position. That was putting the net pension liability on the books.
Could you be a little clearer about that?
Yep. So in 2015, the township was required to implement GASB 68, which basically changed the pension accounting from a funding model to putting the whole liability on the books.
GASB's what's GASB?
GASB sets the standards for government accounting. So that's the Government Accounting Standards Board. So it's basically the equivalent of FASB for the private sector.
It's a national standard.
Yes. Yep. But the change in accounting was due to the prior way it was accounted for was to the extent that the annual required contribution wasn't funded, that would be the liability that's put on the books. The standard was changed to calculate what's basically the promises that have been made to retirees, future retirees. That total liability is what's put on the books minus any assets that have been put into a trust as of the reporting date. So it changes from a funding model to that net pension liability.
So the net change is an accounting standard.
Yes. And that liability was always disclosed in the footnotes in the RSI, showing the unfunded liability, but now that unfunded liability hits the actual financial statement. So the calculation's done slightly different. Historically, it was in the notes. Now it's on the face of the financial statement. So this is the second year that the township's required to show that liability.
Is this affecting all townships?
It's affecting any entity that has to follow GASB and that has a pension plan. So that's almost every government. So.
Right.
I have a slide also, and that might be a nice segue, but a similar change is going to occur for OPEB or other post-employment benefits. Right now, the model is for if the ARC is being underfunded, that's the basis for the liability hitting the books for other post-employment benefits. But the model is also going to change the way that pensions calculated to say what's the promises that have been made. The actuary will run that projection out, report it in today's dollars. That's what's shown on the books minus any assets. That'll hit the financial statements in 2018. So in 2017, the footnote disclosures will be included. In 2018, that liability will hit the books.
So to make sure I understand this, no changes in the financials have actually happened. We're talking about a different method of reporting them.
It's a different method of reporting that will change how that liability is reported in government financial statements. For December 31st year ends, that'll be hitting the books in 2018.
Understood.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll move on to page 9, which shows these were recommendations that we had in the prior year, and this shows the current year status of those recommendations. You'll see reconciliation of the the bank reconciliation, bank reconciliations to the general ledger, those were completed during the year. So when we did the year-end audit, those items had been corrected. Recording year-end accruals, identifying all the accounts receivable, all the payables. There was a process in place during the year where those items had been identified. So we noted that that item had been complete. Monthly reconciliation and closing procedures. There's still some items that were open, so we have that item as in process. The pension trial, there's no trial balance maintained for the pensions. That information comes directly from the statements, but ideally all financial information should be in the trial balance in the general ledger. The township uses QuickBooks, where your general fund, all the other funds in there, but we would recommend that also the pension fund should be included within QuickBooks and reconciled on a monthly basis. The financial reporting system, and a lot of that just tied into the bank reconciliations that weren't done in the previous year and just closing the books and getting all the accruals in there. That item is in process. Lastly, on page 11, the compensated absence calculation that was done for the year ended December 31st, 2016. So that had been completed. The fixed asset subledger still is, it's more of an audit process to identify what items need to go in that subledger. That should really be maintained by the township and just maintain as fixed assets are capitalized, put on the subledger, and then depreciated as they're put into service. And last year we had some issues with not seeing certain approvals on disbursements. We didn't have any issues this year, so we noted that item had been completed. Assessment of the control environment. If you look at the environment, the risk assessment, we concluded those items were effective. Because of some of the recommendations we have, we still have that the control activities, information and communication and monitoring, those items as yellow for suggested improvement. If you remember last year, we had some items that were red just from the lack of controls around doing the bank rec and closing the books on a timely basis. So that's moving in the right direction. And as well as the key processes, we had several red areas last year, but you'll see, excuse me, starting on page 14, the processes to the left. And then we also conclude to the right if the process is both designed and operating effectively. Designed is basically the controls in place to get the number recorded in the books. And then operating is based on our testing, is the numbers that are hitting the books proper or not. So if green, where you're saying it's effective, if it's yellow, it's because we had one of our recommendations that would still need to be implemented. We don't have any items that are red this year. Page 16 highlights the change that I had mentioned in the accounting for OPEB. It'll be GASB Statement 74 and 75 that will be implemented over a 2-year period. So next year when you'll see the financial statements, that'll have the new footnotes. That'll be very similar to the pension footnotes that were adopted 2 years ago. There's already a liability on the books for OPEB for the cumulative underfunding of approximately $3.5 million. But you'll see this last bullet point. If you look under how it's calculated to say what's that total unfunded liability, that's about $7.3 million. But the way the actuary calculates it under 74 will be slightly different, so that number could potentially go up when we get the actuary report for 2017. But that just gives you a sense of the difference between models, between cumulative underfunding and then the total unfunded liability. And to date, there's been no money set aside in a trust. So whatever that actuary calculates as the total OPEB liability is what will hit the books, minus what's already on the books. Does that make sense? Okay.
That's on pensions?
The new standard for next year will be on other post-employment benefits. The township's already implemented the pension standards.
So that deals with post-retirement medical insurance for uniform personnel.
On page 18, you'll see a 3-year comparison of the statement of financial position. This includes not only the general fund, but all the other special revenue funds plus the capital assets and long-term liabilities of the township, you'll see total assets are up to $27.5 million compared to $26.3 million in the prior year. Current assets is mostly made up of cash. There's also a balance of receivables in there. You'll see capital assets at $18.1 million for the year. That's down from 18.3, and the difference is just excess depreciation over the capital additions for the year. That deferred outflow of resources of 1.2 relates to the pension accounting and the deferral of certain actuarial calculations. That's also what that deferred inflow under the liability line represents, is actuary calculations related to pension. There's certain items that get deferred and recognized over a certain number of years. The total liabilities decreased slightly to $25 million compared to $25.1 in the prior year. You'll see long-term liabilities decreased approximately $1 million. The net pension liability decreased about $1 million for the year because of the favorable market returns, helped decrease that liability. So there is that helps go to the bottom line because of that decrease in the net pension liability for the year. And then the net position, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, was $13.5 million for the fiscal year. Now, just keep in mind when the OPEB standards implemented, I mentioned that liability could potentially double, if not more, and that would potentially wipe out the net position on an entity-wide basis. But you'll see a lot of governments in that position when the lack of funding of pension and OPEB, having to implement those standards will take a pretty big hit on the entity-wise net position. But once I go through this, I'll highlight where you are at from a general fund perspective, because that's more of how you budget, how you look at your numbers, and show your unrestricted net assets compared to your spending is a rather healthy position.
Chris, help me with something, and I don't know if I don't want you to get too deep into the weeds, but it seems to me, and I know that you have no control over the GASB standard and the OPEB standard and all of that.
I have to follow them.
Right, right.
Well, you have to follow them. I have to make sure.
Right. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that we would be forced to do that when the nature of pension and post-employment benefits is that those costs will not all come due at one time, but we have to account for them at one time. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, I completely agree with you, because it's not like you owe that money today.
Right.
Under the old accounting, I mean, you could even argue you didn't owe the money for the underfunding, but then you're getting dinged for not putting away the money that would kind of make you whole over time. But I think the thinking, and I can't speak for GASB, but what I believe the item was, when they implemented these standards, they thought that would help give government a incentive to save at least the ARC, to put the ARC away. Mm-hmm. It's mostly happening for pensions, not everywhere, but it's not really happening for OPEB.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see that OPEB liability just continue to grow, and it's growing at a more rapid pace back in your footnote, well, not in your, but back in a government's footnotes who's not saving for it, compared to what's hitting your books. Because, you know, if you're funding your PAYGO or your current premiums, you're at least showing that you're putting, you know, you're funding part of it.
Well, and that's what we've always done. We've funded our municipal minimum municipal obligation year over year in terms of pensions.
Yeah.
If I may, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a philosophical argument on a national level among accountants and actuaries about proper reporting standards, and it began about 10 years ago. It's been ongoing, but it heightened, and these GASBs, they're up to 67 now.
We're up to
75.
80. I was looking at this morning.
Okay.
It's like 87.
I'm a little behind.
Yeah.
The
Come out
the
like
general
every other
philosophical bend is to adapt government standards to the corporate standard. And the corporate standards are set under the assumption that the business will go out of business. So you have to fund your liabilities
Right.
very strictly. I think perhaps there's a better way to describe it. But there was also a philosophical argument that there should be a single national standard for reporting so that everyone was on the same page when it came to understanding financials. When you start adapting those standards to government, it starts to make the liabilities look as though they're not being paid, which is not correct.
Right.
And that they would all have to be paid today, which is also not correct. So really, it's a reporting standard that is being forced upon local, state, and all national governments, all governments nationally, that is not necessarily changing any liabilities or changing any assets. It's just making one number look different than it ever used to be without actually reporting more information or worse information. It's just it's a different standard, and it's not necessarily helpful.
Right, and that's my point. I mean, what's the point of doing it if it's not helpful in any way, shape, or form? I mean, when the OPEB standard comes on, we stand to our total net position stands to be negative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be.
It is going to be.
Will
It's
that
almost like you have to look at it.
will that affect our capacity to borrow in any way, or any of that? I mean, that's what I'm afraid of. That
No. I mean, Chris can speak to this, but again, the folks that look at financial reports have been looking at footnote disclosures for forever.
Yeah.
They don't just look at the face of the statement.
Yeah.
And virtually every
So they-
municipality will be in the same boat.
So they've been they've been factoring in
Yeah, and I can't.
liabilities.
Actuaries do look at that information, and they crunch their numbers in their own way anyway. It's not strictly based off what you see on the financials, but they do factor in how well funded is your pension, how well funded is OPEB. If you're not funding OPEB, that information's in the financial statements. And I'm not aware of anyone that's been impacted from a rating perspective when the pension standards were implemented. Because
for the record, the township has always paid its bills, and our credit rating is AAA. So our reporting is good.
Double A.
AA.
Chris, you mentioned ARC. That's an acronym for Annual Required Contribution.
Correct.
And we've never missed that.
Right.
Well, I can't say if you've never missed it.
You've never missed it on the pension side.
On the pension
Right,
side.
that's what I'm
Your
referring
minimum
to.
municipal obligation. You are not funding your ARC in terms of post-retirement health insurance.
Yeah, 100% of the ARC is not funded for
You have never
OPEB.
funded your.
Right.
Okay.
You've met your current year obligations as it relates to providing the coverage, but the ARC is not looking at just current year obligations. It's essentially amortizing the liability over some period of time.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to take us too
It's
far
fine.
afield,
I mean,
but that's just
it's a hot button, and your
doesn't make
rationale
sense.
is pretty common. So it's almost like you have to look at the statements and then back out.
what's annoying. That's not the last time I'll be accused of having an annoying rationale, I'm sure.
Oh, so next year when I present, we can at least have numbers that we can talk about, and then we can talk about why they did it again.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
On page 19, again, this is on the entity-wide basis, so it includes all funds, and it's on your full accrual accounting, so it includes, changes for OPEB, net pension liability, pension expense type of items. But you'll see total assets increased to total revenue increased to $16.3 million for the year. Total expenses also increased to 15.8, and what kind of convolutes some of those numbers is the change in the net pension liability, picking up the OPEB expense, depreciation expense are picked up in those figures. So on an entity-wide basis, the total expenses were at 15.8 for a positive change in net assets of approximately $496,000. Once I get through the rest of the presentation, I'll highlight the general fund to you. So those numbers you may look more familiar to you on a at least that's how you budget, basic on your general fund. So
Your notation here is investment earnings declined under that line. Is that because of just the market?
yeah, and if you look at it, most of the investments are in cash or really short-term securities. So there's not because this doesn't include any of the pension activity since that's a fiduciary fund. So that is just a function of what interest rates were on either bank accounts or short-term securities. But I can also highlight to you in the draft the pension item, and you can see what the returns did for the market there, which are, of course, much more, I believe, much more favorable than what you see here. So the last part of the presentation is either our firm or industry required communications. And although we're planning to issue a clean or unmodified opinion, if we had difficulties getting through the audit or issues that wouldn't come through the opinion, we'd be required to bring those to oversight's attention or governance. And there's really nothing of a negative nature. We'd be required, other than the outstanding recommendations we have that we previously went over. But if the township had barely acceptable accounting policies, I would be required to bring that to your attention. There's no overly aggressive accounting policies that the township's taking. As I alluded to, we're not aware of any fraud or illegal acts, which if we were, we'd bring that to your attention much sooner than at this point. We didn't have any disagreements with management, no difficulties in performing the audit. Page 23, the last item we'll need before we issue the financial statements is a representation letter from management that they take responsibility for the financial statements. They've told us everything that we need to know as it relates to the audit. That would be the last item we need to release the financial statements. We also go through a process to make sure our firm and the people in the engagement are independent of the township. Of course, as being auditors, we have to make sure we're independent, so we have no independence issues that we would have to disclose. Lastly, before moving on to the financials, I've also included my contact information, as well as Bill Seymour, who was the engagement partner again this year on the audit, and that's on page 31. And then in the back section of this document are the financial statements. And if you turn to page 13. You'll see the first column there is the general fund, of which there's roughly $5 million of total assets for the year. You'll see 3.8 of that is cash. Item I want to highlight is if you look down in the fund balance, there's different categories of fund balance, but unassigned fund balance is basically the most liquid component of fund balance, and that's at $4.4 million. If you look at the Government Finance Officers Association has a benchmark of roughly 25% of expenses. If your unassigned fund balance is at least 25% of your annual expenditures, that's a relatively healthy sign. And if you look on the next page, well, it's 2 pages over, total expenditures for the year at $14.5 million in the general fund. So that just shows you that over 25% of your annual expenditures are in your unassigned fund balance, which if you use that measure, it's healthy. I can't say from your perspective what you would consider healthy, but from an industry perspective, you don't see a lot of governments with their unassigned fund balance that healthy. So although if you look at your net position on the entity-wide basis, it's taking a hit for all these changes in pension and OPEB accounting, which aren't current liabilities, if you will, your general fund at this point has been rather healthy. On the pension side, if you turn to page 17, you'll see there's the non-uniform pension, the police pension, combined has $25 million worth of assets. On the next page, you'll see the investment income for the year. That's in that middle section. The investment income was $2.1 million when you factor in the appreciation and the interest and dividends. So that's rough. That's not quite 10%, but that shows you that at least the investments had a favorable return for the year. And again, since that's a fiduciary fund, that doesn't roll up to your entity-wide financial statements, those numbers that I was showing you in the presentation, since those are assets that are saved for paying out pension benefits. Any other questions on presentation, financials?
Anybody?
Again, my contact information's in the presentation too, so call myself, call Bill at any time. And
Thank you very much, Chris.
all right,
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Okay. Moving on, before approval of minutes, I would note that we did meet in executive session where we discussed matters permitted by law, including personnel, litigation, and real estate. Approval of minutes, July 13th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And our July 27th workshop meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Buildings and grounds. Mr. Rothbrock, I don't know if you have anything at this point.
I don't have a report.
Okay, so I would, at this point, I would turn to Mr. Pine.
Well, Mr. President, we did have the dedication of the public safety building renovations on July 29th, and if I could, I'd like to ask Fire Chief George Reese if he could come up and kind of give a quick summary of that wonderful day.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, on the 29th, the Public Safety Building addition was dedicated. Township Commissioners, County Commissioner, and we thank the Township Commissioners, obviously, the County Commissioners for the gaming grants in excess of $600,000 to date that we've acquired through grants for that, and also the Township firefighters. They were all in attendance, as well as ABC 27. And the reality behind it is this building is going to keep the fire service in Susquehanna Township in service for 50-plus years, the structure alone. What the firefighters have to do to keep the volunteerism going is doing exactly what they're doing, dedicating themselves to the citizens of the community, as well as each other, and making sure they get the right training. And with the guidance of the staff here, as well as the commissioners, we felt it incumbent to thank you all from the fire side for that commitment. And it goes hand in hand. The volunteer fire service is in Pennsylvania is larger than the rest of the country's volunteer fire service. And what they give back in dollars, if we had to switch it over, is probably about $3 million what we're saving with the volunteers. So they do an excellent job. They put a lot of time in. And what I did is I turned the table around, turned the turned the lectern around and let the firefighters introduce themselves to you guys, because it's not that often that firefighters get to interact with their commissioners or elected officials, especially across the board. And it's very important. They thought it was very important to say thank you and to say who they were. So with that, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, George. Is that it? Mr. Pine? Okay. Budget and Finance, Commissioner Sanderson.
No report. We'll be preparing our annual budget as we normally do. It's August, so we're getting around to preparing statements. The normal process is September, October, and then present as we always have in November. So I don't anticipate any changes to that. Mr. Manager, we will have to put together a preliminary budget meeting this month, secondary in September, and present that material to the commissioners.
Sounds great. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Napper and Commissioner Engel are absent, and we have Commissioner Napper's report. I assume that's been posted. You have anything to add to that?
You do have a copy of the report at your desk, and it has been posted, yes.
Okay. Nothing to add?
Nothing to
Okay.
add at this point.
Thank you. Health and Sanitation, Commissioner Rabarchak.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The next yard waste pickup by Penn Waste is scheduled for Saturday, August 19th. As usual, please have your materials at the curb by 6 a.m. And just looking ahead a little bit, there will be 2 yard waste pickups in both months of September and October, both the first and third Saturdays of both months. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, administration and personnel. Do you have anything, Gary?
I do not have a report.
Commissioner Napper's out and Commissioner Engel's out, and Commissioner Schubert's also was on that committee. Mr. Cratcher, do you have anything?
I do not, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Rothrock. Police. Commissioner Engel's not here. Commissioner Johnson.
No report.
Thank you. Fire and EMS, Commissioner Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, members of all 3 fire companies and the Susquehanna Township EMS participated in the state's annual hurricane drill. Agencies from across the Commonwealth participated, and our very own Chief Calhoun of Rescue Fire Company and Assistant Chief Rogalski flew in on a Black Hawk helicopter to assist in rescue scenarios, so they're probably getting a good night's sleep this evening. Progress Fire Company starts its annual Live-In Academy next week. New members will receive 75 hours of enhanced fire and rescue training all next week. We congratulate members of Rescue and Edgemont Fire Companies for the past 3 weeks of completing the past 3 weeks of volunteer firefighter training at Harrisburg Area Community College. 5 of those members will be taking their Firefighter 1 test next weekend, and we certainly wish them luck. And as a community service, fire hydrants in the Progress area south of Walnut Street are being painted. This program has been going on for the past 5 years, and we will, as opportunities allow, we will try to address all the fire hydrants that need attention in terms of painting township-wide. So that concludes my report.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Recreation, Commissioner Johnson.
No report.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning, Commissioner Robarchak.
Well, the planning meeting for the month of July was canceled, so due to lack of agenda, so I don't have a report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bids and agreements, local share municipal grants. How would you like to handle this, Mr. Kratzer? You want me to just read down those that were submitted?
You may, that would be fine, Mr. President.
Okay. Just so everybody knows, the local share gaming program requires an applicant, typically a nonprofit or an emergency response agency, to seek a municipal co-sponsor. And so every year we get a number of requests to be a co-sponsor. All of them are worthy, and some more worthy than others, but who are we to decide? It's ultimately a decision made by the county commissioners. And the only thing they ask of us is to, like Mr. Dries just mentioned, our public safety building. I mean, that would have been possible without the local share grant, but it would have added significantly to our tax burden. So it's a great program. We're happy to help where we can. But the frustration is that not everything can be funded. So we try to help out where we can and move it along and present it to the county commissioners for their decision. And this year we have a number of programs that are seeking some assistance. And they include our own Susquehanna Township, which is the purchase of a piece of fire apparatus, Southern End Sanitary Sewer Extension, Susquehanna Township Emergency Medical Services STEMS, Kaplan Development, Ward 5, the Fair Housing Council of Harrisburg of the Capital Region, the Jewish Federation of Greater Harrisburg, Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, Wedgewood Hills Swim Club, and the YMCA. And we did hear a presentation on virtually all of these at our last workshop last month. And, from here, once they get the endorsement or the co-sponsorship from the board, it goes down to the county. And it's out of our hands and in theirs at that point. And I will note for the record that one of the big questions that we had about one of the applicants was Kaplan Development, which basically is a senior plus facility. And many senior plus facilities can qualify for special grants or relief from tax abatement. And the question centered on whether a proposed grant of public money would be used to create a facility that would qualify for a lower tax rate, and thereby not providing the full tax revenue to our school district, to the township, and to the county. And we received a letter from the principal of the project that they will not be reaching out for that money. And so I think that was an important thing that they cleared up for us. So I just identified all those that we're looking to co-sponsor, and I entertain a motion on it.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of the fire apparatus for the township.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve them all, to co-sponsor them all? And if not, we can go through them one by one.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comment?
Mr. President, I would just, again, I think they're all worthy, and I agree. I do have just some personal concern with the applicant, with the application from the Jewish Federation of Greater Harrisburg. Only a conflict of interest. My daughter, their application is calling for funds to improve the building. My daughter will be a kindergartner at the Silver Academy next year, so just to avoid the appearance of impropriety, I don't know, since we're all, well, I will mention it. Since we are bundling them together, I don't think I need to.
The way to proceed would be to vote on all of them with that one.
Okay.
Vote on that one separately.
Okay.
Okay.
So if,
I
could you
can
amend your
amend my
motion?
motion.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if we're going to do that, I have some questions about the B, item B, the southern end sanitary sewer extension. And I don't know if I can support that, and I don't want to vote against the others.
Right. Okay. All right, so how about if we pull those two out and consider them separately? Well, actually, there's a motion on the table for all of them.
I could amend my motion, Mr. President, it'd be easier.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we vote on all except 1B and 2G.
D.
Yeah, Jewish Federation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I amend that to 1B and 2D?
Yep. Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, so let's go down the line for the other two, Southern and Sanitary Sewer Extension.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Commissioner?
Yes, just a few items. Just for background, so at our July workshop meeting, we had voted on and approved a list of applicants, all of who had presented detailed proposal either at that meeting or the prior meeting. So I haven't received any information except what Commissioner Pine had mentioned in executive session tonight briefly about this. So I'm not sure what I'd be voting on, first of all. I don't know if anybody else has information about this. Maybe you all do. But I haven't received anything, so I don't know what to be voting on in the interest of transparency. Also, I have some concerns because if I understand correctly from what I heard briefly, it's to fund building sewers to individual homes in the Fifth Ward. I have concerns with that. As First Ward Commissioner, I think many of you know the extensive problems we've had with sewer laterals in the First Ward, particularly the building sewers, many of which are 70 years old if they haven't been replaced already. We have a sanitary sewer project and stormwater project going on in the ward, and those building sewers are not being replaced, although the authority has done that in every other project, infrastructure project that they've done. If you want to talk about the expense of, some of the residents have already undergone for this, $12,000 to have one building lateral replaced, $20,000 from expenses incurred because of the project for another lateral. So we're not talking about small change here. We did apply for a loan from the infrastructure bank from the county at a very low rate, 0.5%. Still, those residents' laterals were not included in this project. I won't go on, but in good conscience, I can't support this when the residents of the First Ward have not received equal treatment. I fought for years to get their laterals covered, just like every other ward in the township. There was even a lateral-only project in the 8th Ward a couple years ago. So I don't know what the deal is, but in good conscience, standing up for my residents, I can't support this.
Any other comment?
Can I just clarify
please.
a few things? Just and again, I apologize, Commissioner, in terms of the information. This
Please,
is
can
not
you talk up?
this is not to offset cost associated with building sewers this is a cost. The authority has a cost to extend the sanitary sewer system. What's being proposed is a grant to offset the cost to the authority as it relates to financing this. The impact that it would have on individuals would relate to the tapping fee, not specifically to building sewers. So the authority is not offsetting costs associated with individual building sewers, but rather offsetting costs that will ultimately reduce the tapping fee that's imposed as part of the project. So I just, again, just want to clarify what this is.
With all due respect, we don't have any information in front of us, so I wouldn't know that. We don't know what we're voting on, actually.
We just heard it.
Mr. President, if I could just mention that this township is being, I don't know if persuaded is the right word, required is the more appropriate word, by Department of Environmental Protection to install sewers in parts of the township that do not have any sewers at all. This area that we're talking about is an area that has no sewers, 121 homes, and I think another 10 vacant, or 10 lots, I think. And those are being required to put in sewers for the first time ever. They all have currently private septic, on-lot septic. It's estimated that the cost of the hookup fee or the tapping fee, I guess is the proper term, could be in the vicinity of $20,000 to $30,000 per home without any kind of additional funding or grants or what have you. And it's our hope that perhaps we could go to the state to try to get some grants, some funding, some assistance, some help. Because it's a $4.6 million project that both, the authority, has to worry about financing. And I can tell you that to go after state grants, there's a requirement typically for a local match, and this type of funding, the local share casino grant funding, could be considered the local match. So the $250,000 being requested here could be used as a local match in a state grant, if in fact we were able to get a state grant, and that's not a guarantee. But just a little background, and I apologize because I should have brought this up at the last meeting. I had discussed it, but as the last meeting came to a close, there was a lot of farewell to our former commissioner, and I think getting caught up in that, we all had some nice things to say about that, and I neglected, my bad, to discuss this project in any detail, and I apologize. Thank you, Mr. President.
If I just have a follow-up question then for Manager Kratzer. So you're saying the point of this would be to defray costs to the homeowners for the hookup fee?
The point of it would be to defray the authority's cost as it relates to the extension. But the tapping fee is a function of the cost. So what ends up happening in terms of calculation of the tapping fee, you are correct. It will have an impact in terms of reducing the tapping fee to the individual property owner as it relates to the connection of the system.
That's my question. You answered it. So it's it will reduce their tapping fee. So when someone builds a new home in the township, they are required to hook up to sewer, right?
Correct.
And they have to pay a tapping fee.
That is correct, yes.
Of course, these homes are 70 years old, though. Average, just FYI.
I just want to say, I wish that we could treat all the residents the same. But I don't know if you remember that there was a gentleman standing here that night when Edgemont was here, and that was his problem. That when him and his wife were building in this township, how much money they had to pay. I don't have a problem with us going after grant money to help our residents. That's not my issue. My issue is that I think we need to treat every resident the same. If we're going to do it for the residents in Ward 5, then we need to be looking at money to help everyone. I'm not really sure what the difference is. I don't know what the difference is between the residents. And that's what and if I'm not mistaken, the gentleman from the 3rd Ward, that was, they came in and they spoke that night about it. But if I'm not mistaken, they actually had a conversation that was either with you or it had to have been with you because their house is only about 2 years old. But I recall him and his wife both calling me, about the same issue. I'm not saying that we shouldn't apply for the grant because of this, but I just think we need to set a standard and stick to the standard. We're either going to help all the residents or we're not going to help anyone. And I think we should be helping all of them because that's what we're here for.
Commissioner Rothrock, did you want to say something?
I just want to know, I'm trying to recall looking over all the attachments that I was sent. Did we receive a formal application that met the requirements, a letter or
No.
something on this?
We did not, no.
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe I worked for the federal government for too long, but if you don't get the right paperwork, you shouldn't be considered.
Yeah, I mean,
Considered yet.
No, that's what we're doing now, isn't it?
Right. None of it's been.
No.
And we still don't have the paperwork. And we're
No,
gonna-
actually, we considered it two weeks ago.
Yeah, may I just ask a question again, and this might be my lack of understanding, but this is proposed to be our application, not
Yes.
an external entity's application.
Right.
In terms of the application process, my understanding is that was information that you wanted from external entities that were requesting co-application status.
Correct.
Not for we didn't provide anything relative to the fire purchase
Yes, they-
apparatus,
they-
other than verbally.
No, they provided a presentation.
And, Mr. President, it's correct to say that Commissioner Pine has been talking about this project for 5 years.
To who?
Very,
To who? Oh, okay, his wife, okay.
Members of
okay.
members of the board, this has been discussed before. This isn't something new, except, of course, Commissioner Rockwell, being new member,
Yeah, I'm not
certainly
aware
he's
of it.
unaware, and I apologize again.
So-
However, had he been at the, he couldn't have voted on our last meeting anyway.
Right. So the question is whether or not we give it to the county and let them make the decision, just like we do with every other project.
Oh,
So,
that's,
any other comment or questions? All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
no.
So 4 to 3.
Do you want to do roll call?
We got it, 4 to 3.
Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. President?
All right. Dave, would you do a roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Barczyk?
No.
Commissioner Rothrock?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Pine?
Yes.
Commissioner Lynch?
Yes.
Commissioner Sanderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Fleming?
Yes.
4 to 3.
4 to 3.
Okay, on to
That's
the
what he
Jewish
said.
Federation of Greater Harrisburg. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay, got it. Very good. Now, number 3 is authorization to sell 2005 Ford Crown Vic.
Yeah, Mr. President, we had advertised the availability of a 2005 Ford Crown Victoria through Municipid.
Dave, can you lift your head up and so we
I'm
can
sorry.
hear? Thank
Sorry.
you.
Through Municipid, which is an online bidding platform in lieu of, historically, we've utilized the COG auction, but we've utilized Municipid in the last couple of transactions. The bid that came in was for the amount of $2,510, which is generally consistent with the Kelly Blue Book value associated with the age of the vehicle as well as the mileage on the vehicle. So staff's recommendation is to authorize the disposition and sale of the 2005 Ford Crown Victoria.
I make a motion to sell.
Is there a second?
Second.
My question is, was this
Mr.
a
Rothrock.
police cruiser?
Commissioner Rothrock, second.
Yeah. Number 2.
It was
It was second.
at one point it was a police vehicle. It was transitioned to use by the fire company, but it initially was a police vehicle. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, ordinances. Ordinance 17-10, ordinance prohibiting parking on the south side of Hurst Street from its intersection with Canby eastbound for a distance of 165 feet, Ward 3.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 17-11, ordinance prohibiting parking on the west side of Rustic Drive from Schoolhouse Lane to Shell. Any motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Moved and second. Any comment? All in favor?
Yeah, I have a
Go ahead.
question. I have a question.
Oh, you want to get down?
I do, but you don't want me coming back next week complaining about it, okay?
As-
So where are we talking about on here?
saying.
I know it says Schoolhouse Lane and Shell Street. Do we have a PowerPoint presentation here, or can we pull it up on Google Maps? Where are we talking? Where are we talking in relation to the middle school?
It's exactly behind the middle school, parallel. Rustic is parallel to Shell Street, which is parallel to all the fields behind the middle school. It runs north-south
And we're prohibiting parking for,
on the west side.
Yeah, so there's, that street is like, the homes are on the east side, and you can
This-
park along the sidewalk. But what happens is if people park on the other
Right.
side as well, emergency apparatus can't get through. Chief spoke to us at the workshop, emergency apparatus can't get through. You can barely get,
The street's
my
too
SUV
narrow.
can't get
so this
through.
is parking on the side of the school?
Yes, on
Okay.
the side, yeah, that's closest to the school.
The street's too narrow.
I got it. Are we still talking about, so you are allowed to park on the other side of the street?
That's right.
That's not permitted parking, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure there was parking.
There was a traffic report that recommended this at your last meeting and circulated to the board, and you voted to advertise it.
Yes, we did.
Authorize it for this meeting.
Are you saying I can't have questions this time?
No, I'm saying there was a report you did have.
I'm just
you did have
checking.
Description of the street and pictures.
Oh, there were pictures attached to that one.
I
Okay.
have it if you'd like to see it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ordinance 17-12, prohibiting parking on the east and west side of Diamond Street from its intersection with Brookfield Road for a distance of 141 feet south from Diamond Street, Ward 7. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ordinance 17-13, for the incurrence of a lease rental debt in the amount of $9.993 million in connection with the financing of the refunding of a portion of outstanding guaranteed sewer revenue bond series of 2012 of the Susquehanna Township Authority, and this was the subject of a hearing that we had earlier in the meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Unfinished business. Do we have any?
No, Mr. President.
Mr. Kratzer, nothing?
Nothing, no.
Okay. Mr. Foreman,
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
School Board, Commissioner Fleming?
Yes, Monday, August 28th is the first day of school. So we are eagerly anticipating that, and at least I am. No, I'm just kidding. So we wish all the students a wonderful school year. That concludes my report.
Well put. You know school's starting when the band starts practicing.
Oh yeah, well
Back to
they've
work.
been at it for about the last month here.
Yeah.
They never stop.
Yep. Authority, Commissioner Sanderson?
No report, thank you.
Indian Wheels, Commissioner Barczyk?
I have no report, thank you. I do have something for Shade Tree.
Go for it.
We've gotten quite a few complaints at the township about low tree limbs, and as Commissioner Fleming just mentioned, that school will be starting soon, and when the tree limbs are low in the road, it prevents school buses from getting through safely, as well as our emergency vehicles, both the ambulances and the fire engines. So the ordinance is that tree limbs must be trimmed up 14 feet, at least 14 feet above the roadway and 8 feet above the sidewalk. So if you could take some time to check out your shade trees and make sure they comply, it'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Communications, Commissioner Pine.
Yeah, just, Mr. President, to alert the commissioners and staff that the newsletter deadline is upon us. So if they have any articles or things to include in the newsletter, please contact Bob Reichert ASAP so that it might be included. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything on any recreation?
No.
Think of? Okay. New business. 2018 Gypsy Moth Suppression Program. Is that a typo, or was that supposed to be for the end of this summer? Is it for next summer, or this summer?
It's for 2018.
Okay.
It is for 2018. And again, just to provide some context on this, this is a voluntary program that's administered through the Dauphin County Conservation District. It is not a broad-based spraying program. It's a program that requires individual property owners to elect to participate. But as a prerequisite to allowing residents to elect to participate, the municipality must elect to participate and decide how it would potentially fund or finance the spraying. And the cover letter from the Conservation District notes that there's two methods to pay. One would be out of general municipal funds. The second would be for collecting the cost associated with the spraying from those property owners that are electing to participate in the program. Historically, the areas of focus in the township have been Mountaindale and along Roberts Valley Road. And according to the Conservation District, no residents have requested to participate in 2015, 2016, or 2017 in this program. But again, as a prerequisite for property owners to be able to elect to participate, this step is required to be taken by the municipal governing body.
Right. And is there adequate, in your view, communication with residents in the affected areas?
I'm not sure how the Conservation District communicates the availability of the program.
Okay.
I know we didn't do any direct outreach relative to the availability of the program.
Right. I know it's on them. I just.
Should we put it on newsletter?
But it's absolutely it's something we can highlight either through newsletter, as Vice President Johnson suggested, or through our municipal website.
Okay.
Do we need to take action to participate?
They require us to take action by, I think, the letter said by the end of July. I'm sorry, not the end of August, rather.
Okay.
Do we need to vote on this?
You would need to vote on.
So, and the action would be to decline their kind offer to spray, and the costs associated with it, I'm sure.
It would be both. The letter requires you to elect whether you as a municipality are essentially participating or offering participation in the program. And then the second is how you're going to fund participation in the program. We had this discussion with the Conservation District last year, just in terms of, I think the board's question was, well, what are we talking about from a monetary perspective? They were not able to provide us with that information because of the fact that it is a voluntary program. It's not commissioners deciding that these areas of the township should be sprayed on a broad base, but rather it's up to the individual property owners to elect participation.
Okay.
I don't know how again, the program was essentially inactive for a period of time and then came back in 2015. But again, in 2015, there was no participation. 16, no participation. 17, no participation. There was a program. This was a pre-existing program prior to a brief hiatus. I don't know how, Sean, perhaps you know how the township funded this in the past.
Yeah, I think we paid out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than property assessment or special levy, it was generally paid for because black flies fly across people's properties,
Sure.
and so that's how we did it. But I don't think we've done it recently.
Personally, I think it's kind of odd that we're put in a position to make this decision, and in turn collect an assessment from people as opposed to the entity that's sponsoring the program. But that's how they.
Doesn't happen that way in Lancaster County, huh?
Well, I'm not suggesting that.
All costs seem to roll downhill.
Yeah.
Well, if this is an end of August deadline, the newsletter wouldn't help us because.
Sure.
Except
the
to raise
deadline,
general awareness.
It's the end of August is for us to say
Right.
whether we'll participate and how we would pay. The property owners determining that they want to participate in 2018 would be, I don't know what the deadline would be, but it would be later. They could do it in 2018.
Yeah, but how do we know?
How many are going to participate and what the cost will be? You know, that's what's very strange.
Well, I think the strategy would be to raise the general awareness by way of website, you know, so that next year when we're sitting here, either we have some calls asking for gypsy moth suppression or we don't.
So for this year, we need to make do we need to make a motion?
Just a motion to politely decline the offer.
I make a motion that we do exactly what the president just said.
Second?
Second, any comment?
Yes.
Yes.
Keep in mind, this is a cyclical pest. Just when you think it's gone, it comes back.
Back.
Yeah. And this stuff never really, in fact, it has a really, really, I remember for many years, the Blue Mountain was brown.
Yeah.
And everything was literally eaten. And I don't know what the cycle is. It's every 3 to 5 years, perhaps. But once you stamp it out and you think it's gone, it's not.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have a question, if I can, Manager Kratzer, or if you know, Mr. President. So if we decline the offer, then residents have no opportunity to participate?
That's my understanding based on the cover
See,
letter.
that's the thing. And if nobody's participated in the past 3-4 years, or nobody's asked to participate,
That's because the gypsy moth hasn't been bad.
right, I know, and you raised a good point, actually, that it
Right.
is cyclical, and
So you want me to withdraw my motion?
No, I don't. I love your motion.
I want us to move on.
Yeah, I understand.
Would it be possible to request it and set a dollar limit? And the thing that bothers me about it seems open-ended if we
Yeah,
had a
I-
lot of
I-
participation.
The problem
I
is.
mean, the cover letter, just to give you some perspective, you know, and again, they're saying that the cost could be as much as $50 to $60 an acre. Now, I'm not sure what kind of acreage
A lot.
are we talking about a lot?
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah. There's also a technical issue related to property rights. You can't turn off the spray. It's done by helicopter or airplane, and sometimes I think by defogger with a truck. You can't turn it off on one property and turn it on with another.
I think
It's not a
Conservation
problem, but
District- Conservation District will only spray areas where the property owners consent.
right. But next door neighbor properties being contiguous could have objection to that.
Yeah, and there is reference to spray blocks in the
Yes.
letter.
And of course, the wind doing what the wind does. I don't recall this ever being a problem with implementation, because generally speaking, people don't like their backyards to be eaten. But the request does come with problems either way. We don't have a definitive cost expectation. We have problems of implementation from property owners giving permission, and I don't think anyone really remembers how bad it could be, so it's pretty easy to just let it go. I'm not making a recommendation, I'm just saying this, if we decline it, then that's it, we're out.
So the debate here is whether or not to set aside a certain amount of money, and we don't know what that amount is, in an unbudgeted line item, in the event that somebody walks through the door in the next 3 weeks and say, spray my gypsies. Is that right?
I don't think they have to, the homeowners don't have to apply by the end of the month.
No, the homeowners don't have to apply by the end of the month.
But we have to opt in.
determine.
What is the deadline for them?
The Conservation District will contact them, maybe not very well, but will contact them at some point at the beginning of 2018.
Okay.
And we could also do something to increase the public awareness of the option in 2018. We have to get the information from the Conservation District. But all they're saying to us now is they're only going to be offering it to places where the municipality opts in. But you also have an option of opting in and paying for it, or opting in but saying that anyone who signs up and wants it has to pay for it.
Why don't we do that then?
Okay.
That's another option you have.
Opt in and let,
I
So-
apologize. When is the deadline again? I'm sorry, August?
August 25th is the
25th is the
deadline.
deadline.
Our deadline.
Our deadline, not the deadline for applicants whose property, what the property's.
Right, right.
They haven't told us what that deadline is, but it'll be in 2018. We would have to go back to the Conservation District and ask them when they're going to require people to sign up.
Mr. Foreman, Mr. Grubik, do you recall if the township ever supplemented, subsidized?
I don't recall. I know that that there has been gypsy moth spraying, it had been gypsy moth spraying in the township.
Yes.
I remember, as you said, Commissioner, the mountain was devastated.
Yes.
About 10, 15 years ago. But I don't recall whether the township actually participated in that. I think it may have been a state program, and as well as the black fly.
Black fly,
remediation
gypsy
in the
moths,
river.
a host, yes.
Yeah, the Conservation District used to get funding, outside funding. I don't know if it was federal or state.
Should we kick it to the workshop?
Federal
Yeah,
funding,
that's what
okay.
I
They used to get federal funding, so they,
Find out.
but now since they don't get funding, they don't expect funding, now they require the municipality to either fund it or the property owners asking for it to fund it. Sure. They don't fund it.
well, I make a motion to withdraw my motion.
Can we consider this at the workshop
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah.
Can we get more
Yeah.
information? Can DCNR just tell us what the possibility or what the life cycle is, or so we have more information?
Sure, we'd be happy to do that. I
Thank
know we
you.
attempted to get information
Instead
from
of
the
us
administrator
rushing.
last year, and there was very little information
Sure,
that was
oh, no
provided.
problem. But I thought maybe if we
but
can
could
do a
follow-
little
we could
digging
follow
and
up on
find
that.
out.
Okay, so without objection, we'll table this to our August 24th workshop meeting.
So that would be enough time then? Can
Absolutely.
you respond the next day?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is commissioner comments. We all talked out?
I just have one quick comment. Commissioner of the Third Ward, we're having a meeting in Edgemont at the Firehouse on October 16th from 7 p.m. Thank you, Chief, back there. That's my only comment. Let me say it again. Having a meeting for the residents of the Third Ward at the Edgemont Firehouse on October 16th from 7 p.m. Thank you.
Is that like a town hall meeting?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have something very quickly. I just want to say I was pleased this morning to attend the Susquehanna Township Rotary Club meeting in which Officer Julio Ferrafino was honored as the club's Officer of the Year. Officer Ferrafino has a wonderful personal story, having immigrated from Nicaragua and earned American citizenship by virtue of his service in the United States Marine Corps. It was fantastic to be there and see him honored by the Township Rotary Club as their Officer of the Year. And the plan is to have he and leaders from the Rotary Club attend our September meeting so we can hear more from him. And last year it was Corporal Rietheimer, and who's distinguished himself as a fantastic officer. And Officer Ferrafino has done the same. He was an absolute joy to. It was a pleasure to be there this morning.
That's great. It's great when our officers get that kind of public recognition.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? All right. Should we pay some bills?
We shall, Mr. President. I move to accept the report of bills paid in the amount of $541,646.02.
Second.
And second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Move to second. Any comment? All in favor? We're out.
What's that?